Right, of course.
And of course, I don't think it's likely in the slightest, but I would put it in the improbable but not impossible category.
Right, it's a little bit silly. But recently, a second thing I wanted to bring up, I was speaking to my aunt about this nativity scene, and she said, oh, I have this friend, he'll set you straight, he'll answer all your questions about religion, and this thing went on for a while. And finally, I spoke to him, and I was anticipating a really good argument, but he kept arguing about the soul, and saying we all have souls, the soul is the vital life force in us, and he gave no evidence for it. And I said, why should I believe in this? He said, because humans can't have the faculties to experience God, so God reveals himself in Scripture, and that's why we should believe him.
And that proves a soul how?
That's what he said. I said, well, do you believe all books we read? What about other religions? And he said, oh, no, it's different. I experience it. That's our life force that we have.
Well, if humans don't have the faculties to perceive God, then how does he know God's there?
That's what I told him. He said, but if you have faith, God reveals himself to you in Scripture. And
hey, you know what?
So if you believe it, then suddenly you know it's true.
Yeah.
Apparently, that's what he thought.
If you have faith, anything's true.
Yep. I said, well, I believed in it once before, and I had faith, and now I don't. So, can I experience God? Is that a possibility? And the argument pretty much went nowhere from there.
There are, well, I won't even say it. So, well, I'm glad you got back in touch with us. You were going to have a meeting and tell us how that came out?
Yes, we did have our meeting, but unfortunately there were no protesters.
Ah.
But we had a record turnout. We had a great discussion, and it was really nice. It was a great end of the year.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Thanks a lot for calling back and giving us details on what happened.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a great one.
Thanks, Justin. Bye-bye. And we have Guy in Japan.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I can relate to what Tracy was saying about the indoctrination before growing up in a strict Mormon family.
Ah.
But that's not why I called in. I wanted to ask about, I've been talking with some people about the problem of evil, and I seem to get as an answer a lot of free will argument. And I feel like maybe I don't really understand it. It seems like it's so easily answered, but I don't know. I wanted to see if you can maybe explain to me what the Christian or the theist free will answer to the problem of evil would be.
Well, here's the question. When these people that you're arguing with are asked whether or not God knows everything, including full details of the future, what is their response?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do they accept that God is completely omniscient, including future events?
Yes.
Then free will doesn't matter. If God knows everything you're going to do before you do it, and God can't be wrong, then you have no choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's the problem, though. They look at it. What's happening is they respond, but you have free will. And they're usually, what they mean by that is God is not controlling your actions. But the truth is, it doesn't matter if God is not controlling your actions. If he knows everything you're going to do, something has already determined your actions, whether it's God or not. So they're probably, when they're saying you have free will, they're probably saying God is not controlling you like a robot. My response is, I'm fine accepting that if that's what you believe, that God is not controlling me, but just the fact that he, with hands off, sees everything I will do up to the day I die means that I have no choices.
And it also seems like, why is it necessary for us to have free will? Like, what is good about free will?
Well, I don't know that it's necessary. In fact, I'd challenge somebody to demonstrate it exists. I mean, it's possible, but since we can only do one thing at a time, how would anybody be able to demonstrate that they could have done something different than they did?
Yeah. I seem to get a lot of answers saying that, I don't know, somehow rationalizing that we do have free will and that it is necessary and it's good, which just leads me to think, well, then does God have free will?
Well, there's a lot of problems here, specifically as Tracy pointed out, with the idea of free will in a worldview that includes an omniscient being. There's also a ton of questions you can ask after the fact, like, is there free will in heaven? If so, then wouldn't you be able to sin? And then you get all kinds of answers like, yes, there's free will, but you wouldn't want to sin. Well, then that wouldn't be me. Clearly, there would be something that would be dictating my behavior and limiting my free will. But to get back to what you originally asked, which was the free will response to the problem of evil, and since we didn't really address either one of them, the problem of evil is essentially an argument against the existence of God, that pretty much it's against the existence of specific gods, that says if there's a benevolent, all-knowing, all-powerful God, then that God cannot exist in conjunction with evil. Because if he's all-knowing, then he knows about the evil. If he's all-powerful, he can stop the evil. And if he's all good, then he would stop the evil. And the kind of, not freshman, sophomoric Christian response is to say, yes, but we have free will, and that's important, and so God will not overwrite your free will. Well, the problem of evil doesn't just deal with the actions of individuals, whether they have free will or not. The problem of evil addresses the entirety of the world we live in, and actually it's probably better expressed as the problem of unnecessary evil, in much the same way that fear is a good thing and pain is a good thing, and you know, it lets you know not to keep touching the stove. The extent to which evil exists, or things that do harm exist, goes well beyond the pale. It doesn't necessarily, birth defects, that's not a function of free will. Tsunamis, that's not a function of free will. Those types of things also fit into the kind of newer argument from evil, and they cannot be responded to by free will. So if you're discussing the argument, the problem of evil, and they're coming up with free will as a response, instead of going down the rabbit hole of free will, you can start by saying, free will has nothing to do with birth defects, tsunamis, cancers, etc.
Yeah, I guess I just don't understand why I keep getting this answer when it seems so, like, inherently flawed on so many levels. Yeah.
You keep getting it because it's the one that they got from their preacher. Just like when Leanne called in to tell the story of the serial killer who kidnapped that woman, she probably got it because it's something that evidently James Dobson or the Dobson family has been kicking around here recently. And when we get calls from people, the reason we get some of the same arguments over and over again is in part because they get bandied around by apologists like, you know, well, won't mention any names, but all the various apologists get people spun up with these arguments. And they are incredibly convincing to someone who already believes. Even when I began to have doubts about my own beliefs and everything else, I went to someone who I consider to be intelligent and wise about the ways of Christianity and said, look, I've got some atheist friends, which was true, and how would I witness to them? Because I just can't find a way to really, any hard-hitting evidence, because it's all so personal. And his response is, well, ask him how you can possibly have any morality without God. Literally, the conversation went this quick. He said that, and I went, oh, yeah. Well, duh. Of course. Why didn't I think of it? How can all these atheists be so stupid that they haven't thought of this? That is how convincing it is, as long as you're already, you have all the preconceptions that people build their theology on. You have to force yourself to take an objective look at these issues in order to determine, okay, do they actually have any merit? I mean, that sounds really good, and it certainly bolsters my belief, but is it convincing? And unfortunately, the way most people discover it is by actually talking to some atheist, particularly somebody who's been where they were, and they bring up this argument, and the atheist points out, that's dumb. Of course you can have a morality without a religion, without a God. All you need is individual desires and a cooperative environment, and you can build from the very, very simplest basic building blocks an entire moral structure that is incredibly complex and diverse over time. It's not even hard.